In nomine Patris et Filii Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus.
Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen.
Cor Mariae Immaculatum,
Ora pro nobis,
Sancte Joseph,
ora pro nobis,
Sancte Bonifatii,
ora pro
in
nobis.
nomine Patris et Filii Spiritus Sancti. Amen. We continue the study on the revolution at the liturgical level. We are on page 190, an Orwellian moment. Take it up, Michael. Or who's Orwell? Anybody?
George Orwell,
Who wrote?
of Vice of Men.
It was in
1984.
1984. So it was supposed to be in the future with the globalist apostate world. And it's a lot worse than even Orwell imagined, and we're in it. An Orwellian moment, Michael.
Suddenly, the destroyers of tradition, who had been ignoring or deliberately flouting the rubrics and rebelling against authority, were transformed into heroes of the church, received forms of worship which had been the mainstay of the spiritual life of the faithful for centuries, were instrumental in the formation of countless saints, were deemed useless and cast aside by the quote-unquote courageous actions of the reformers. But there is plenty of evidence that anyone truly courageous enough to put his head above the parapet and oppose these reforms was immediately shot down in flames and subjected to a campaign of bullying, intimidation, and personal abuse by members of the liturgical movement. It will become clear that Antonelli and his companions were acting not from the moral virtue of courage, that is, to save the traditional vigil and prevent it from coming to harm, but rather from their own narrow, one-sided, and self-serving desire to destroy it. Armed with this knowledge, we can easily read between the lines of their request to Pius XII concerning the Easter Vigil. It would not be simply a question of changing its timing, but incorporating all the revolutionary changes that Father Bea and the other members of the Papal Commission had been planning, as recorded in their 1948 Memoria.
So question, was this desire of Bea and Bernini to put the vigil at night, was it purely a matter of timing for them?
No.
What else did it mean for these revolutionaries? Was it just a matter of having it at night?
No, it was a matter of bringing into question the way the liturgy was set up.
And just get people used to changes.
Well, with the night change came many other changes. It wasn't just putting it at night, right? They brought in facing the people, bringing the vernacular, praying the Our Father together in the middle of the ceremonies, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't just the timing in keeping the old liturgy. It was bringing in a whole train of seeds of revolution, which will explode later.
So then, it was by the very fact that they were given permission to move it to the night, the fact of that, I guess we could say change, that they took advantage of that and they went ahead and they added all the other changes and took out things from the liturgy.
Yeah, they took advantage of Pius XII's approval to put it to the night. Taking liberties with tradition, Anthony.
As we work our way through the 1951 to 1956 Easter Vigil reform, we should note that the principle of fidelity to tradition was starting to be replaced by the principle of destruction and innovation.
Repeat that sentence, please.
As we work our way through the 1951 to 1956 Easter Vigil reform, we should note that the principle of fidelity to tradition was starting to be replaced by the principle of destruction and innovation. The way was thus open for progressive, tendentious, and prejudiced views fresh from the committee room, to become the official policy of the Holy See and be set in a juridical stone. It would also be useful to keep in mind that only 50 years before, Pius XII's commission applied the new revolutionary principles to the Easter Vigil Reform. The Catholic bishops of Westminster had written, quote, "In adhering rigidly to the rite handed down to us, we can always feel secure, whereas if we omit or change anything, we may perhaps be abandoning just that element which is essential. To subtract prayers and ceremonies in previous use, and even to remodel the existing rites in a most drastic manner, is a proposition for which we know of no historical foundation and which appears to us absolutely incredible," end quote.
That's the Cardinal Archbishop and Bishops of the Province of Westminster in England, 1898. 1898. So what are they basically saying?
They should never change.
Yeah, just stick with
Keep
the old.
stick with traditions.
Stick with the old, right?
And if you abandon it, you're in what? If you start playing with it, you go into what?
Error.
Error and quicksand and all kinds of disasters. But it's kind of strange, isn't it? The very ones who had to, in secret, rebel against Catholic Rome and the popes by having their dialogues and their tables facing the people in secret in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Now suddenly they're the heroes. There's something really wrong with that, you know? It's kind of, you know how the abortionists, the doctors and nurses who had to do abortions in secret, right? Down the back alley, as they say, with a hanger, and it's just, and now suddenly after 1973, they're all heroes. They were courageous to do abortions when it was illegal. And now they're all, that's the same thing, these crooks, criminals, destroying the lifeline of the church, cutting off an artery, cutting off the arteries to the neck. You know, you cut the arteries, the brain dies. Brain needs the blood, right? That's what they're doing, is cutting the arteries. Go on.
But the incredible did happen. First in 1951 with the experimental Easter Vigil, then with the publication of Pius XII's New Ordo of 1956, containing the full-blown reforms.
The blessing of the new fire was compromised. Gabriel, loud and clear.
The Reformed Easter Vigil begins, as in the ancient rite, with the lighting of the Paschal fire. So far, so traditional. But any concordance between the two ceremonies ends there. What happens next is the stuff of all revolutions. The Reformed rite immediately starts, in true pro-Crucian fashion, on its path of racking, hammering, and amputation of living, viable elements of tradition to make them fit new ways of thinking. The first step in this process occurred when the Reformers cut out 2 of the 3 prayers for the blessing of the new fire. Both of the eliminated prayers were rooted in Scripture and asked God to enlighten the faithful on the path of salvation as he had enlightened Moses coming out of Egypt, and to protect them from the quote-unquote fiery darts of the enemy, that is, the evil one. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 16. It is now well established that when the Novus Ordo was created, prayers were removed which had expressed the Church's teaching on concupiscence, the fiery darts, and the necessary spiritual warfare a Christian must engage in against the assaults of the devil. But the basic and indisputable fact, unknown to most, is that the Liturgical Commission started this process with the 1956 reform of the Easter Vigil by expunging this prayer from the blessing of the new fire.
Yeah, expunging. So cut off the prayers, cut, slash, right? A death by 1,000 cuts. This is what they're up to. Go on.
With it, they also expunged a vital element of Catholic doctrine expressed in the liturgy, that the items blessed by the Church's prayers are imbued with the power of God to protect the faithful from the influence of the devil. This is only one example among many to illustrate how the ancient traditions possess valuable points of wisdom, whose loss
Impoverishes.
impoverishes the spiritual life of Catholics. If the aim of the reform was to, quote, make the liturgy become the source of an authentically Christian life, end quote, as its leaders have constantly proclaimed, this cannot be achieved by destroying traditions and squandering inherited resources. For it is axiomatic that the lex orandi shapes the lex credendi, which in turn influences how we live. When these prayers were removed from the liturgy, the faithful were deprived of the spiritual aid which the Church had lavished on them for centuries. Also missing from the 1956 prayer of blessing the fire, is the former reference to God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, an omission whose significance will become clearer later in the rite.
Why minimalized blessings? A parallel can be drawn with the excision, the cutting out, of all but one of the prayers for the blessing of palms in the 1956 Palm Sunday Reform. The question arises as to why the Reformers dismantled the elaborate structure of blessings, whether in the Palm Sunday or the Easter Vigil ceremonies, that the Church had built up to emphasize the very essence of Holy Week as a celebration of Christ's work of redemption, from which all blessings drew their source. The full significance of these truncated blessings only emerged after Vatican II. They were the prelude to the phasing out of the blessing of objects. Footnote: the new Book of Blessings, which replaced the Rituale Romanum, has largely dispensed with blessing items for use by the faithful. The designated prayers mention blessing the people when they use the item, blessing those who made it or look at it, but not the actual item itself. Well, that's very interesting. Because in the Roman ritual, right, the priest will bless the brown scapular, the cords of St. Francis, St. Philomena, those cords, and there's the cords of St. Joseph. Bless oil, bless salt, bless water, bless animals, blessing of airplanes, blessing of cars, houses, right? I've never seen a new Book of Blessings of the new Novus Ordo. I've never seen one. It'd be interesting to compare it, though, to see exactly what they dropped. There's even a blessing of beer and blessing of wine for the Feast of St. John. And a blessing for all things. So it's interesting they would drop this. I've always been a little leery. How do I say this? I know many priests promote, they say that if you get the brown scapular on you and blessed, if you have a new one put on, you don't have to have it blessed. And all right, I don't know. I wonder if this is where it's from. But I always bless the scapular, because the object itself is an object. It needs to be blessed, right? I always go ahead and bless it. I might be wrong, but I don't think so. I wonder, see how it says here? The designated prayer meant in the footnote, blessing the people when they use the item. So it looks like that's where that might have come from in the new blessing. You have the scapular on, you're already enrolled, no, you don't have to bless it. Anyway, it's not a major point, but I always bless them anyway. Because the object itself is blessed. So, did you finish the sentence?
Ooh.
Yeah, the power to bless material things. Oh, anyway. All right. The full significance of these truncated blessings only emerged after Vatican II. They were the prelude to the phasing out of a blessing of objects in the post-conciliar period, when generally speaking, priests no longer believed that they possessed, through the sacrament of ordination, the power to bless material things, or that there was any difference between the sacred and the profane. So I noticed in the Novus Ordo, there's no more real blessings. And when they greet a priest, they never get a blessing from a priest. It's not in the habit of the Novus Ordos. When I forget who and where and what year, but there was revealed to a certain privileged soul that a soul in purgatory, it might have been a priest in purgatory, who didn't give blessings when he left, the presence of people. And he was in purgatory for some time for being negligent on that. So people should never leave the presence of a priest when you say goodbye, or, never omit having a blessing. And normally the priest will say, okay, I'll give you a blessing, right? And as a priest, most of the traditional people know to kneel down. Obviously, if it's an old lady and she can't kneel, that's an obvious, right? Same with Holy Communion. They just can't kneel, so obviously you give them a blessing. But many of the Novus Ordos, they don't even know. They just don't know to kneel down. They just don't know. So many times, the first, second time, third time, you just give the blessing. And then once they become more familiar with tradition, then eventually they start kneeling and you can remind them. Normally we kneel for a blessing. And people appreciate that. And then another correction that has to be made is people, in some countries, it's a custom to kiss the hand of the priest. In the Philippines, they take the hand of the priest and put it on their forehead. But they only should kneel for a bishop. They go down on their right knee and kiss the ring of a bishop. That's how you greet a bishop, because he represents Christ, and you kiss the ring, which symbolizes his full authority from Christ. So people shouldn't kneel for the kissing the hand of a priest, but they can stay on their feet and kiss the hand of the priest, right? Because he's not a bishop. And then, is it the right knee or the left knee? One priest I knew who was very knowledgeable about rubrics, he said there's no such thing of a left knee genuflection. There's just no such thing. So when you greet a bishop, you go down on your right knee and you kiss the ring. That's the proper way, because you're using your right knee to honor God in the bishop. And when you greet Novus Ordo bishops and kneel down and kiss their ring, which we do, I do, and most priests do, in the airports or in the public places, they're quite surprised, and they're edified. Actually, some of them, they're edified. They're kind of like taken back. No one ever does this anymore. So, but that is the proper way to greet a bishop. On your right knee, kiss the ring, and then greet him. And then if he wants to shake your hand, you shake his hand, you look him in the eye. Yes, Your Excellency. In the United States, we usually address them, and in Canada, it's usually Your Excellency. In France, they say, my Lord, no, Your Monseigneur, Your Grace. In Australia, they address the bishop as my Lord, my Lord. And in the US, we usually say Your Excellency. So, yes?
I was just going to ask Father that about the genuflecting on the right knee for the priest. It also depends on culture, right? Right? The culture.
Yeah, I mean, if they're used to greeting the priest on the knee, and that's just everybody's doing it, well, I wouldn't say anything. But as a technicality, they should only kneel for a bishop. But people sometimes confuse it, and these things happen. They're not the end of the world. But Bonini's not too invisible hand, this little eel, Bonini, what a weasel. Michael, uncover this weasel.
All the evidence indicates that this was the outcome desired by the members of the Papal Commission from the outset. 1. Chapter 3 of their 1948 Memoria mentions their plans for the radical reform of the Rituale Romanum. 2. Many blessings and sacramentals were eliminated in the 1956 Holy Week rites. 3. The Liturgy Constitution introduced a theological shift in the liturgical ministry of blessings by rooting it in the laity rather than the ordained priesthood.
So the shift, theological shift, right, of the blessings from priesthood to the layman. Go, next, last point.
4. The 1964 Concilium, of which Bugnini was secretary, stated that, quote, the area in which the most radical revision and new adaptation will be needed is in the sacramentals, end quote.
Wow. Now, who hates sacramentals?
Modernists.
Yes, and even who before?
Protestants.
Protestants. They despise sacramentals. Name 3 sacramentals, each one of you.
The Miraculous Medal, the Red Scapular, and St. Benedict Medal.
Brown scapular, the cassock, and you said St. Benedict medal.
I
Right?
did.
This is miraculous medal.
There's other scapulars.
I have the green scapular.
Yeah.
Yes. The black scapular, the rosary, and the surplice. Oh, the crucifixes.
Crucifix, yeah. Many things are sacramentals. We live around them all the time. Palms. The palms for Palm Sunday are sacramentals, right? They dispose the soul to receive grace. And they're blessed. Those objects are blessed. The Palm Sunday blessing gets a lot of blessings on Palm Sunday. In the traditional pre-55, in the post-55, they dropped already many blessings. So it's quite interesting, isn't it? These insidious modernists, they're trying to cut down on the blessings of objects, which makes sense in the ecumenical efforts, right? If you're going to try to adapt the Catholic liturgy to please Protestants and be more ecumenical, you got to get rid of a lot of things, and one of them is cut down on blessing of palms, cut down on the blessing of throats for St. Blaise, cut down on the blessing of objects, right? So soon people just live secular. They just live secular. There's not much of God in their life. That's the result of this, yes?
Is it proper to classify holy water as a sacramental?
It is,
Okay.
and a powerful one. Yeah. Yes, one priest told me that he knew a rector of a seminary, I think in Denver. And the rector always used the Novus Ordo holy water to sprinkle the seminary. But this SSPX priest, this was years ago, gave some of the real blessed holy water to this priest and said, use this, it's probably more effective against the devils. And he said when he used it, he could tell instantly the difference. And the devils know also. In the exorcisms, when they sprinkle them with the Novus Ordo holy water, they just laugh. Oh, you're tickling me. Give me some more. But when they use the real holy water with the exorcism of the salt and the exorcism of the water and the blessing of both and the mixing of both, the devils scream and howl. It burns them. It burns them. So, yeah, isn't that interesting though? Their deliberate attack on the blessing of sacramentals. Sacramentals are very Catholic. They're very Catholic. But getting tattoos of the miraculous medal or tattoos of the Benedictine medal, those are not sacramentals. They're not sacramentals. However, I know one boy who got in a terrible car accident. And he kind of went, a little wild, of course. And in the car accident, his whole back was scraped and all the skin was nearly torn off. Except where he had a tattoo of the Benedictine medal, it was intact. So he was very happy about that. But anyway, that's not to encourage any tattoos. They are not of God. They are condemned in the scriptures, and they're displeasing to God. All right, Michael, finish the paragraph. So we see these changes. You just listed the 4 of them. And who's behind it, everybody?
Bugnini.
Yes, the insect, Bonini. Go on.
That is exactly what the Memoria had set out to achieve in 1948. The 1956 reform was only one stop along the road to the terminus ad quem, the final goal. Even if it can be argued that these changes were small compared to what came later, nevertheless, a success of relatively minor alterations.
A succession.
A succession of relatively minor alterations made within the complex network of the traditional liturgy tends to unravel the whole structure and destroy the meaning of the entire ritual. It was in this manner of piecemeal reform that the Liturgical Commission robbed the official Holy Week liturgy of much of its significance.
Ever hear the saying, a stitch in time saves 9?
Yes.
Ever hear that? That's an old saying. What's it mean?
I guess when you get a little tear on your clothes, if you do one stitch to prevent it when it's really small, you'll avoid having to do a lot more stitches when it gets bigger.
Right. So what they're doing here is unstitching little by little bit. And under Pius XII's nose. And they have in mind unraveling the whole thing. Pius XII, who knows what it was in his mind, but he approved a lot. He did approve a lot of Bonini's initial destruction. So, I don't know. We heard the talk of Dr. Honowski, and it's interesting that he doesn't accept that new fake secret that was revealed under Benedict XVI. Remember the secret of Fatima that they revealed, and it
Wasn't it about John Paul II being shot?
No, it was about a prelate dressed in white being shot at with arrows.
It was supposed to be the 3rd secret.
Yeah.
But it was the first secret that supposedly Our Lady revealed without giving an explanation.
So Dr. Honowski, who's a pretty grounded, good man, I know him, and he doubts that's even the 3rd secret, the real one. But he says the real one seems to indicate that people will look for the Mass and they won't be able to find it. It'll be very hard to find the real Mass. And we're there now. We're living that. And it's painful because we got our faithful on the West Coast, and I have to get out there. What do you do? I can't just leave the seminary a week. That's too long. But anyway, God will provide. 16, Easter Vigil reorchestrated. Anthony.
When it comes to appreciating the traditional Holy Saturday rite, we could think of it as a grand orchestra transposed onto the spiritual plane, in which the prayers, hymns, and ceremonies formulated centuries ago by saints and consecrated souls are performed in a manner worthy of their composers' intentions. Clearly, any appreciation of so ancient a rite cannot be based on abstract academic theories or the private hunches and personal preferences of a group of liturgical quote-unquote experts. One cannot, like the modernizing reformers, overlook the accumulated wisdom, piety, and sanctifying properties of the old rite with its many centuries of hallowed use. Nor can one fail to take into account that, just as in an orchestra, all its constituent parts had a definite and logical relationship not only to every other part, but also to the main structure. So, disturbing even one element is bound to disturb the internal balance and harmony of the whole. We must also consider the wider impact of such changes on the Church itself, which, before the 1956 reforms, had always appeared as a cohesive organization, ensuring an exact correspondence between the lex orandi and lex credendi. No pope before Pius XII had ever removed parts of the liturgy pertaining to the Catholic faith and morals, as he allowed his commission to do, so that the disbeliever would not feel, quote-unquote, uncomfortable, as if truth and virtue were understood to be relative to time, place, or culture.
And then the little reminder, who forbade removing rites of the Catholic ceremonies, adding or omitting prayers. Who or rubrics?
St. Pius V.
With what? What with what? Council.
Council of Trent.
Council of Trent also is explicit about that. And also the condemnation of the Council of Pistoia under what pope?
Pope Pius VI.
Yes, as I read out during that class. You know, they wanted to put the Mass in the vernacular. They wanted the canon to be out loud, remember? He forbade it. This is smacks of heresy, he says. Go on.
As we shall see in more detail, the reformers under Bugnini's general management radically reorchestrated the Easter Vigil in 1956. However, the only similarity between Bugnini and a conductor was that both could make things happen with the wave of a hand. Judging by the results he produced, which are set out below, we will be justified in concluding that he and his commission, to put it charitably, must not have had an ear for music. Soon the orchestra would be playing discordant notes out of harmony with Catholic tradition, under the baton of a leader who was, to all intents and purposes, tone deaf.
Yeah, that's putting it very kindly, isn't it? The blessing of the 5 grains of incense, downgraded. Gabriel, loud and clear.
The centennial custom of the Roman Rite was to bless 5 grains of incense, to be later implanted into the Paschal candle, with the ancient prayer Veniat Quesumus and the antiphon Asperges mea Domine, said by the priest. The Church had given this ceremony greater prominence in the Middle Ages, when the art of allegorical exegesis was at
Exegesis.
exegesis was at its height. As the 5 grains of incense represent symbolically the 5 wounds of Christ, they were considered worthy of a solemn blessing before being inserted into the Paschal candle, whose pure white wax was also a symbol of Christ's original body. However, the 1948 Commission whipped up a spurious controversy over this issue, charging that during all those centuries, the Church was wrong to use the prayer Veniat for that purpose, because in the early Church it was used to bless the candle.
Footnote: a version of this prayer is found in the old Gelasian sacramentary of the 8th century. It was only one of several used in the Church at the time for the blessing of the Paschal candle before the Roman Missal was compiled. Go on.
Some detractors of medieval symbolism even suggested that the use of the Veniat in the pre-1956 Rite originated from a linguistic muddle due to the misinterpretation of the Latin word incensum. This theory, implying that the Church Fathers were not proficient in Latin, strains credibility and can be easily debunked.
Footnote: this accusation can be refuted by examining the wording of the prayers. Although incensum can mean either lighted or incense, there was no possible confusion in the original sources, whereas the 8th century source used the masculine form unc incensum for the lighted candle. The pre-56 Missal used the neuter orc incensum, which could only mean incense. Go on.
What actually happened to the solemn blessing of the 5 grains of incense at the Easter Vigil as a result of this pseudo-controversy constitutes another sad chapter in the 1956 Reform. The accompanying prayer Veniat was not axed. But as we shall see, the Reformers used that other pro-Christian operation of stretching and skewing to make it fit a different context. This left the incense grains without any ceremonial prayer for their blessing, also making the Asperges antiphon redundant. Furthermore, according to the 1962 rubrics, even the blessing itself could be dispensed with in the rite. The priest could bypass this part of the rite if the incense grains had already been blessed before the vigil. That is, he blesses them only, si non sunt benedicta, if they are not blessed, and in silence, nihil dicens. This gives a further opportunity to reduce the solemnity of what St. Augustine called the vigil of all vigils.
So what does the 5 grains of incense signify?
The 5 wounds of Christ.
And what does the white candle made by virgin bees signify?
Christ's virginal body.
Yes. Yeah, never forget that. Adjutorem nostrum in nomine Domini.